good position with an owner who allows him to do his job, and that's rare. But I think, yeah, everybody does it for him now. And Mike is a great guest to have because he knows he was ground floor with me when we would get attacked for saying how he was a good executive.
I'm pretty sure I have a segment on the JAKIB channel at some point in maybe 2021 or maybe late 2020 after Doug was fired of Mike saying how he's a top 5 GM. And I think he might have gotten roasted in the comments. But
yeah.
You two were way ahead of that. There's no doubt about it. Good stuff there. Let's get to Mike Gill as we speak about him now. He's in the green room. Make sure you guys follow him at Mike Gill Show on all his platforms, including a subscription on YouTube at Mike Gill Show over there. Mike joins us from 97.3 ESPN down the shore and 97.5 The Fanatic in Philly on the weekends. Mike, welcome to the show, brother. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
I'm doing all right, boys. We got a little lull in the football calendar, but the Eagles are never on the back of people's back burner.
No, they never are. Not in this town, at least when they're this successful. It's interesting since you went there. Do you think it's the success? Do you think, obviously football is the top sport, but you see how people get hyped. But it's generally, because you cover all sports, it's generally for the Phillies, it's when they're good. It's like a morgue down there when they're not good. Now, luckily they've been good recently. We know what the Flyers are going through. We know what the Sixers went through. And with those particular teams, if they're good, there's a lot of interest. If they're not, there's not a lot of interest. With the Eagles, it'll waver a little bit when they have their rare down season, but there's still incredible passion. Do you think that's built in at this point, or do you think that could waver if they have a cycle of bad years?
No, because the fact that they've had the success that they've had, if they happen to go into a lull, that just brings people's fever for wanting to fix things. When teams go down, even with the Phillies right now, they're having a good year. You're 12 games over 500, but people like to complain, and then people like to fix things. People like to think that they know more than the people who were in charge, which goes to, I think you guys were talking about Roseman for a little while there. It's, I know more than Roseman. I could do a better job than Roseman. We talk about all the time. Fans generally default to blaming coaches because in their mind, they know they can't play the game at that level. But many people do think that they are qualified to say, coach, manage a baseball team or coach a basketball game. I don't know that people... football's a little different. There's a lot of intricacies in that. But I do think a lot of people think they could be a general manager and run a team and pick a roster, which is why those people always do get so much scorn from fans, is because it's a job that fans do think they could do. And, if you have a team like the Eagles that had a down year, I think the passion would come out a lot more, as opposed to some of the other teams like, the Sixers. While I think people think they could, do the job of Daryl Morey or whatever, the reason I think that the passion kind of goes away is because of the fact that the season was just so non-competitive that you're almost like, okay, this is ridiculous. It's not competitive. I'm not even giving you, because you have time. Football allows you to still have your life. You only need to dedicate one day to investing in the season. So the other sports, you got to invest every day. And some people just say, okay, I'm not investing my time every day if you're going to give me this effort. Football, a little different.
Yeah, baseball too goes to that. I want to ask both of you guys this. How close are this era of the Eagles to a dynasty? And I mean that in the real sense, not in an Eagles fan. Oh, we're a dynasty. Like, there's dynasties in the history of the NFL that are well talked about, documented. The Steelers of the 70s, the Niners of the 80s, and the Cowboys of the 90s, and even the Patriots, obviously, in the 2000s. But how close are the Eagles to that? Is it one more Super Bowl? Is it two more Super Bowls in the next couple of years? Like, how close do you guys think we are to actually cementing ourselves as a dynasty in the NFL?
Oh, man. The NFL is tough. The Kansas City Chiefs, what they've done, what the Patriots did, you do see these elongated runs of success. I mean, how long do you have to give the Eagles? And are they in the middle of it? I mean, the fact that they won one in 17, then got another one here, is the 17 the start of, was that where you put the beginning marker of this run for the Eagles? It's a good question in terms of where does the length of success, because between 17 and to this point, they've only missed the playoffs once, right?
Yeah, that was Doug's last season. And he obviously, they had a ton of injuries. That's when Lean got hurt, I believe. They had a bunch of offensive line injuries, and they kind of fell apart. And then they picked it right back up. But, that first year with Nick Sirianni, they weren't considered a good team, even though I think a lot of people underrated them because they forgot that, hey, if their offensive line got healthy, that was going to make a big difference. And it turned out to be the case. And all of a sudden they start out very poorly, 2-5. Nick gives the play calling to Shane Steichen about week 8. And then was that Chargers game. And then they take off with the running game specifically and make the playoffs as a surprise sort of playoff team. And then they got trounced in Tampa Bay, as they typically do with Todd Bowles. But so I think that first year, nobody thought they were really that good, I would say. And then they just took off in the 2017 season, which was Super Bowl. That was 2017 was Super Bowl 52, but 2022, 2022 was Super Bowl 57. Nick's first one, Jalen's first one, and they played great in the Super Bowl. I think they outplayed the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I thought Jalen was the best player. I thought he was better in Super Bowl 57 than Super Bowl 59. I thought he was the best player on the field in Super Bowl 57. So since that time, I think we're a little short of dynasty because I think it's 22 to right now. They're in the midst of it, and they got 2 of 3. If you win 2 more, I think it starts there. You got to have 3 to be a dynasty. You got to have 3.
What's the minimal number of where it starts?
I think it's 3. 3 wins. 3 wins.
What date range?
Yeah, because that's the question. Like, Mike, this is my problem with using 2017, though. It's like a different regime. Now, the only other dynasty I think that had multiple quarterbacks was who? The Niners. They had Joe Montana, and I guess who am I missing? Did they have Steve Young? Steve Young, right? Steve Young. So that's the only other the Steelers had Terry Bradshaw. The Cowboys had Joe Montana or Troy Aikman. Mahomes, the Chiefs, Brady with the Patriots. Like, I feel like
the 49ers also shifted from Bill Walsh to George Seifert. So to me, that's a breakoff point. Like, I don't put 2017 with the current group.
I agree with you, John.
But everybody's got a different definition. But it was Doug and Carson's team, and to a certain degree, Nick Bowles. To me, that's completely different than what's going on now.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe 2 more with this group would cement it. I don't know. It depends if you factor in.
Well, I think you got to win 3 over, say, 8 years. They're at 8 years. Three Super Bowls in 8 years is pretty stinking impressive if you win them all.
Quite frankly, 2 in this time frame is impressive. Based on the landscape. I mean, there's a while there where you had the Patriots basically getting one. They get 6 in a 20-year span.
Yeah.
So that's an elongated run of success that generally, if you're
to that point, does anybody consider the Jim Kelly Bills a dynasty? No. Does anybody consider Bud Grant Vikings in the 70s a dynasty? No.
I think. Well, they didn't get the ultimate prize. They had a great run of success, but not dynasty level success.
Exactly. Which I say all the time on this show. Zander could tell you what Buffalo did is more impressive than winning one Super Bowl.
I mean, yeah, and it's funny because we go back to this Phillies team. They're good. They're probably going to make the playoffs, but if you're not first, you're last. And most people don't believe that the Phillies are good enough to win the World Series. So therefore, if you're not good enough to win the World Series, you then stink. There is no middle ground. There's no level of
That's
success.
true. Ricky
There's
Bobby
no-
rules,
but
man.
part of that with the Phillies, Mike, you could thank the owner. I mean, the owner, to his credit, but he set the standard on what the fans should want. He said, "I want another championship in Philly." Well, that's now what everybody wants, and if it's not that, it's bust.
Yeah.
Well,
I always joke. I always joke about that movie because it's so true. And Gary Cole was the actor playing Ricky Bobby's father in Talladega Nights, and he's the one who was a drunk in the movie, and he's the one who said, "If you're not first, you're last." And the whole thing was it's obviously comedy for those who don't know, but the whole movie is Ricky Bobby grows up and he believes that if you're not first, you're last. And then at one point, which people forget, his dad said, "That's stupid. You can be first, you can be second, you can be third. There's a bunch of things he could be." And he was just drunk. But man, people have latched on to that, Mike. If you're not first, you're last. And from a sentiment, I'm not even from a joke, from a sentiment standpoint. If you don't win, and the best example of this is the Sixers, and you and I have had this argument for many years. If you don't win, you're worthless. You're worthless.
Absolutely. And there is no level of like the Edmonton Oilers going to the finals twice in a row. They've now lost twice. Like if they go again next year, like that would be unbelievable to get to the conference final, to the Stanley Cup final 3 straight seasons, but never to win it. You just get looked at as almost a loser. You don't get looked at as, man, what a run of success that you've had.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like the Eagles back in the Andy Reid era. They had a run of success. But I will say that Andy Reid run of success put the Eagles on a different level to the fans. I mean, that made the Eagles fans crave a Super Bowl even more. So while that level of success that the Eagles had back then sometimes is kind of looked at as not good enough, or I don't want to say somewhat a failure that they never won a Super Bowl, it did change the dynamics of the Eagles fan base and made it where the standard was if you don't win a Super Bowl, you then become a failure.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of smart fans who understand that, what they do today is still can be traced back to Andy Reid. Like he changed the whole organization. He turned them into when it comes to on the field stuff, because he's the one who turned them into what they are today. But there's a lot who don't understand that. And I'm surprised that there's so many who don't understand that. And why they don't understand it, because that's if you don't win, you're last.
Well, and like in the sports world, it's a fun dynamic of sports fans, doing what we do. People say, hey, like the fans, we're saying how the fans think. The fans also have an 8-hour job generally most days, where they have the release for them is just like, I didn't watch everything. I just am casually kind of paying attention, and then I'm just going to kind of like spew. It's well understood as to why fans make irrational thoughts sometimes. Is because you're not down there every single day. You're not asking questions. You're not talking to people. You're not getting information from people. So the opinions are informed based on just your casual viewing. So when you're down there all the time and can kind of see it, you get it in this area where even if you don't win a Super Bowl, all the stuff that goes into building these teams, the fans will look at it from an inning by inning or day to day basis, where these organizations have pictures of what they want their organization to be 3, 5, 7, 9 years down the road. And that's where there's always a disconnect. The disconnect of, I want you to win the first quarter of this game, and if you're losing at the end of the first quarter, I'm going to boo you. Right? Like you have failed that first quarter, and I wanted you to win that first quarter. Whereas they're looking at a much wider scope of things. And at the end of the scope, you're trying to set yourself up for as many bites of the apple at success that you can get.
Yeah. And that's, now we're going down a psychological tangent. And I'm like, wow. But what's amazing for so many fans, they are so confident in their beliefs. It is amazing to me. I wish I could be that confident.
Well,
It's
the baseball. It's the big, I'm a big baseball guy too. And, baseball is the biggest one. Like if you would have pinch hit for this guy there, the guy that you would have put at the plate, 100% would have got a hit. Yeah. No questions out. If you would have hit for that guy, the guy that I decided to put up in that spot, he would have came through. Or if you left that pitcher in, there's no way he wouldn't have struck the side out. Like, why would you take that guy? So, yes, every answer, and it's the same in football. Why did you throw the ball there? If you would have ran it, they would have got that first down. It's whatever happened. If you would have done the opposite, what you would have done would have been successful.
Yeah. Well, Zander asked me the question a couple weeks ago. And, since I started covering the Eagles on a daily basis, which was 2016, so I'm responsible for this run, by the way. I'm joking. Over that time, I've never missed a game. I probably missed 2 practices, open practices. Knock on wood. Like I've been around in this team, embedded with this team, talking to everybody around this team for that span. And Zander asked me the question, well, could you call a game? I'm like, could I call? Well, if you gave me the play chart, yeah, I could pick the plays. Could I build it? No. Could I teach it? Even more so. No.
Yes. Like I coach baseball. Still, I had practice last night. I have practice tonight. Not for any crazy, but I coached a team that won the World Series. We won the Babe Ruth World Series. I've been to the World Series 4 times.
There you go.
Do I think you're
Joe Torre.
Do I think I'm qualified to manage the Phillies? Because no, not necessarily. I know baseball. I played college baseball. I mean, I know a lot, but football, I have been asked before, hey, would you want to coach football? Which I would like to do. My answer has always been, I just don't have the depth in designing plays. Like I could not design an offense or the blocking schemes. I don't have that visual mindset of creating and the terminology and the verb. Like I always laugh at who comes up with the names of these plays and how did you think of it? Like GOAT 75 Razor. Like why not just have it? Hey, that plays 32.
Great. Yeah, by the way, that's a legitimate argument. Why make it so difficult for young people?
Yeah, like who comes up with but that's the fascinating thing to me about football coaches. How did you come up with the name, memorized it? You got to memorize the names of these crazy plays yourself. And like, how did you come up with them, associate it with the play that you designed, and then remembered it all? I mean, you got Andy Reid with a Denny's menu of names of these plays, and you're like, what the heck? So that's where I think the intricacies of coaching football is pretty.
Well, you know how I compare it? It's like learning a new language. To them, it's like second nature. Like they know. There's only a couple of things. Like Devontae Smith's very honest about it. Everybody runs the same thing. They just call it different things. But everybody knows once you play for a while, you know the terminology. And this coach might call it this. It might be as simple as Tiger personnel versus 12 personnel. But it's like a different language. So it's like to most people on the outside, it's like, you're speaking English all your life and say, hey, go speak French. And you're like, what the?
Yeah. So that's like even the worst football hit, like a Rich Kotite who got mocked a lot and kind of laughed at. The fact that he was able to design and come up with a full offense and stuff, like even like the basic high school coach who comes up with these plays, and I give those guys a lot of credit for being able to.
I would say, football innovation of football trickles up. It's the high school coaches who are the innovative ones, especially offensively. And then it trickles up to college, and then it trickles up eventually to the NFL. It's the exact opposite of normal sort of things where it trickles down, but they deserve a lot of credit. But the thing about it is now with the internet and Google and everything, and there's full playbooks you can find. Anybody can find. Just go on Google right now if you're listening. You can find playbooks of legendary coaches, and you can copy them. Everybody copies from everybody in the NFL. It's not even that. It's because you can find that information. But can you teach it?
Yeah.
That is the difficult part. And that's where I always say Big Fangio stands out because many.
It's funny you say that because, I don't know. Have you guys discussed, what Zach Bond said this week regarding, where they are defensively as opposed to this time last year, how far advanced that they are. And that's learning the terminology. When he says this, what am I supposed to do? And in football, it's a split second that can hold you back. If that split second made you think, wait, am I supposed to do? Yeah, I'm supposed to do that. Bang. That split second of thinking could be the difference in somebody burning you for a touchdown or not. And now when you hear that play, knowing exactly what you do, as opposed to learning it this time around, there's something to be said for that. Now, there's still 4 to 5 guys who have to now learn the defense, which is why, John, I had you on Sunday morning on my Fanatic show, and I asked you who's a better fit. If they just opened up the pocketbook and said, we're going to bring one more guy in, is Alexander the right guy, or would Justin Simmons be the right guy based on what Bond said? Because Alexander would have to learn the defense essentially, where Justin Simmons would step right in and maybe not miss a beat with the terminology.
Yeah. And from that perspective, and with those two players for that reason.
But Alexander's would be the better player.
Yeah, Alexander's the better pure player at this stage. Justin Simmons was a great player, but he's descending. But with the point of Zach's comment, which we did talk about earlier this week on the show, I think he's 100% right with the guys that were here. But to your point, you made that a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of change. So all these new guys are going through the same thing that Zach Bond was going through. Now, there's guys that need to elevate their game that were here, and that's where the hope comes with the Alex Hunts of the world and the Jeremiah Trotter Juniors. But, other guys, like there's a lot of people hyped up about Drew Makuba, obviously. Well, he's got to learn everything. Dory Jackson's got to learn everything, even as a veteran player. Ty Robinson, a lot of people are fired up on Ty Robinson. He's got to learn everything. So for the guys that are here, it's easier for them. But for the new guys, they got to go through the same thing. But that's why Vic's Vic. Vic, all the people that have copied Vic over the past decade, none of them, they copy. You can copy. That's my point of going on Google and searching. You can copy everything Vic does. Honest NFL, the great Twitter account, always give him a shout out, does a phenomenal job. Puts literal schematics of what Vic Fangio's defense is constantly. You can just go to his Twitter and get everything the Eagles do, basically.
Yeah.
Can you teach it?
Absolutely, yeah. You could certainly. And another thing about it is, we talked about, I think Jair Alexander has a connection with the secondary coach here, whose name is escaping me.
Christian Parker.
There you go. Right. How much those things factor in as well. The comfortability with who's teaching it. Hey, I respect this guy as a teacher, as opposed to, this guy's a blowhard. I'm not really paying attention. And that seemingly could have been what happened to the Eagles 2 years ago, is they didn't buy into who was teaching it.
Very clearly, they didn't buy in who was.
And you see the difference. A very similar scheme, a lot of similar players, didn't go so well. Why? Well, some of the guys, and it also goes to show, it only takes 1 or 2 guys not to buy in. You get a guy in the secondary who says, the secondary coach don't know his ass from his elbow. I ain't listening to him. And that could be one of the 4 guys or 5 guys in the secondary saying, nah, I'm not buying what this guy's selling.
Well, and even somebody with the history of Vic, I mean, look what happened in Miami. You had certain big name
Absolutely.
guys who are like, I don't want to change. And they didn't buy in.
Yeah.
And they were still pretty good, but they weren't as good as they could have been because you had certain guys who wouldn't buy in.
And that's a good, I thought, we got to the point, it feels like with Vic Fangio already, just like it's a fait accompli that it doesn't matter who the player is. It's like Stoutland. You give him a player, that guy's going to good. Why? Not because I think the player is good, because Stoutland's that good. Are we at that point with Fangio almost where does it matter? Just give him a player and he'll make it fit. And although we saw that with Bryce Huff wasn't the case, but what he did is he bypassed Huff and just found somebody else that he liked better.
Yeah. Well, I think we are at that point, but I think to your point, there are people forget the bad ones. Like, Bryce Huff last year, because it worked out. Andre Dillard on the offensive line with Jeff, because they found Mailata. So who cares?
Yeah. Well,
as long as
to almost you can connect it to our conversations about Roseman from years gone. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
You're going to get draft picks wrong. You're going to get signings that don't work out. It happens. Not everybody does everything. In the world we live in today, I got news for you. Not everybody's decisions are 100% the right decisions, whether they're the greatest of all time or the worst of all time. Sometimes the worst makes a good decision, and sometimes the best makes a bad decision. So every signing that Howie makes is not going to hit. And, in 2017, a lot of them did work out. But there's been signings since 2017 that did not work out.
No,
Bryce Huff is one of those things that did not work out. They've got other ones that, you had higher expectations for, and they didn't pan out. But you've got to just limit those things. But that doesn't mean that Vic Fangio is going to be able to get 5 new guys all buying in and getting the best out of them. There's going to be somebody here where we might be looking at in week 5 or 6 saying, that hasn't worked out so well so far. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of change. And even the guys who, were backups, Soren Burks, most notably, Isaiah Rodgers, man, they got a lot of defensive talent they got to replace. And to imagine every single one of those changes working out, generally not the way sports happens.
I think too, if I were to ask either one of you guys, the bad Howie moves, the one that stands out the most is Rieger. That's the obvious one. And then generally people go to JJ Arcega-Whiteside. After that, because the guy was getting killed here for years, but it's really like 3 to 5 moves that really stood out, and people just hammered those moves for a long period of time. But do you guys remember Fire Howie was like, I said there was a time when I was doing the radio show, he was the most hated Philadelphia sports figure in the city, and there wasn't a close number 2.
I think people forget. I think if you go back to
though. At that time, whatever years these were, prior to 2017, he was
the only thing that sticks out to me, Mike, about the Amazon show on the Eagles. Remember the Amazon? What's it called?
I watched that thing very intently. That was 2019, right?
Yeah, I don't even know. I think it was
2019 because Wentz was still here.
All it was a bunch of WIP clips interspersed. It was not a great show, but the one thing that stuck out to me was that they had a part of the show where Howie was driving, and he explained he's got the darkest tint possible on his car. So when he's driving, people don't recognize him because they would, say some untoward things. So yeah, things have changed dramatically over the past few years, and rightfully so. I mean, it starts with the drafts. They're on a heater when it comes to drafts. Yeah.
And a lot of times the context isn't there. Like I see people in the chat talking about, he passed on DK Metcalf. Well, what if we told you
Oh,
how he
man.
wasn't
How
allowed
many
to draft
times?
DK
Yeah,
Metcalf?
he wasn't allowed.
got-
He was off the
Right.
board. He was
The
medical
doctors
red
said,
flag.
listen, you can't draft this guy. He's got a neck problem, and therefore he has a medical red flag. So he was not even on the Eagles draft board. So you could blame the Eagles doctors for that, but not Roseman missing the pick.
Yeah.
Now, the Rieger stuff, there was a lot of wonky reporting around who was pushing for Rieger and who didn't want Rieger and who did want Rieger. That stuff always seems to happen, right, when you miss a
Yeah.
pick.
Well, you even saw the dust up the one time with Howie and boy, I'm having senior moments this week. But
Tom Donahue.
between Tom Donahue, thank you. Between Milton Williams and Alim McNeil, and Tom wanted Alim McNeil and Howie wanted Milton, and it both worked out. By the way, both ended up being right. Both are very good
Would
players.
McNeil have been a better fit here?
Well, I think at the time they wanted to run stuffer from Tom's perspective. So, I mean, he's a different type of player, and he's turned into a very good all-around player. But I would say fans would like the pass rusher more. So, for the fans, it worked out with Milton Williams. Who's better? You can make a strong argument for both, depending on what you want. You know, you could say
I'll tell you
Alim's
whose
better.
paycheck's better.
Well, they're both. Alim got a
Alim
huge
got a big
paycheck
deal,
too. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
right there. He's right there. Not quite. Milton's is better because he went later. But I mean, he's. I can look up his contract, but he's close. He got a huge extension. So they both worked out very well. But you see some of that kind of. Now, over the years, I do believe that from things that some things I can't talk about, some things I can talk about. And
Now,
and
Xander,
how
that's what you need to pull out.
Yeah,
exactly,
Mike.
I do believe
When
the
I'm
coaching,
gone, that's your job.
the coaching staff was the one pushing for Jalen Reagor. They wanted, as funny as it sounds at the time.
Yeah, well, that was what I said, the wonky reporting. It was, it felt like Peterson was kind of pushing for Reagor.
Yeah. They wanted, as funny as it, they wanted a Tyreek Hill like impact on the offense, as funny as it sounds.
Yeah.
And they wanted somebody who could stretch the field vertically and horizontally. And they thought Jalen was more explosive than Jefferson, but the scouting staff said Jefferson's better. Remember at the time, I think a lot of people forget, and now he's here, Terrace Marshall. They had Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Terrace Marshall in the LSU receiving room. So Jefferson played almost exclusively in the slot.
Yeah.
In college.
Well, what
and
also
a lot
people
of people
forget is that draft class, Henry Ruggs, who's the other guy? Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah.
They got picked before Jefferson. There were other teams that looked at Jefferson that looked at Jefferson as at least the third or fourth guy. So it wasn't just the Eagles who were like, hey, maybe this guy Jefferson isn't the there were two other teams that took receivers before Justin Jefferson. So, everybody gets these things wrong, but you're right. Jefferson at that time, people thought he would be a slot guy. And the butterfly effect of it is the Eagles got A.J. Brown. So would they be better off with Justin Jefferson?
Devontae first, yeah.
Right. Would they be better off if they took Jefferson or learned from that mistake and then fixed it with Devontae and then A.J.?
Listen. Yeah, and then I always talk about the volume. I mean, he went to a team that had a quarterback that throws for 4,000 yards in his sleep at the time. They were a high volume passing offense. I think if Jefferson comes here, he's still a great player. He's a great player. He's going to be great. But the numbers are not going to be nearly
no way.
As
who's responsible for the Marcus Smith pick? Is that a Chip Kelly pick or a
I thought that was Howie. Wasn't that 2014?
That was, I wasn't here, like I said, but the Eagles basically got caught in that draft. They had about 5 players that they were comfortable taking.
Well, Marcus shouldn't have been in the top 50 or 500.
Well, yeah.
Although I met Marcus at the Super Bowl, and he was a super nice guy. But maybe that was your red flag.
Maybe.
Yeah. So anyway, they got caught and they couldn't trade out. and they had to pick somebody, and they ended up picking Marcus Smith, who was in theory a fit for what Chip wanted to do defensively. And yeah, it didn't work out. But that's one of those things where they got a little bit too cute. I believe Green Bay traded up to get Clinton Dix. That was one of the players the Eagles wanted. Well, he was a good player, wasn't great, but certainly would have been, a better draft pick than Marcus Smith. I'm trying to pull up the names. I know Clinton Dix was one of them.
Yeah.
And Green Bay jumped up to get him.
It was 2013 was Lane Johnson. That was, I guess, Howie's pick, right?
Well,
yeah, I feel like that one was more Chip.
He didn't have as much power back then. Like, if Deion Jordan was there, they would have picked him because Chip wanted him. So, in theory, yes, it's Howie's pick. It's on Howie's. But I kind of look at Howie 1.0, similar to what we're talking about, Dynasty. I consider Howie 1.0 and Howie 2.0 is completely different. So when he came back.
But going from when he first was the GM to 2016, when he left, he was the guy, but it really was Andy, because like people blast him for Danny Watkins, but Watkins was more of an Andy pick.
Yeah, exactly. So there was much more give and take. Like, Howie's in charge now, period.
Yeah. Well, I was at the press conference when Jeffrey said, and this was like must have been Andy's like 2015, 2012, 11 back then. And Jeffrey had said, hey, we've been going off of, Roseman had a draft board, but we really haven't gone off it. We're going to use more of the information off of Howie's draft board than we have in the past. That was kind of like the infiltrating of Roseman getting a little bit more say. And then Reed gets fired and Chip comes in, and then Chip doesn't want anything to do with Roseman.
Yeah. But then I do think the Rager pick was a demarcation line for Howie because he got so much shit for it.
Yeah.
And
by the way, Danny Watkins, I also used to host a show with, also the nicest human being in the world.
Yeah, the fireman, maybe. The firefighter.
He was such a nice guy.
Was that Howie? Was that Howie? What is that, 2011, I think it was?
No, that was a Andy pick.
But yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of differentiate between when it was more, and it's collaborative now, but Howie's got
I tell the story a lot of Danny because I spent a lot of time with Danny because he did a show with me we did an hour show a week together. And he always said to me, now, I don't know that he profiled as a tackle. He had short arms, the whole nine. But he said the Eagles were the only team that worked him out at guard, and he had never played guard in his life. And he had no football background. So he was like, I'm learning a new position. I never played before. He did not like Howard Mudd was the offensive line coach, and Mudd was just so tough on him. And Danny, he was not the kind of guy that took to that kind of coaching, and he just did not respond to Mudd at all.
I mean, Jason Kelsey loves Howard Mudd to this day. I mean, that's something too. It's like, can you handle that kind of coaching? There's so many things that come into that kind of
coaching.
Yeah,
Danny. I had a conversation with Danny one time, and I brought up Walter Payton. He had no idea who Walter Payton was. I was like, how do you draft a guy who just is that?
Oh, it's boy, man. I learned that early in my career with Amp Lee. You remember Amp Lee? He was a really good receiving back. Yeah, from Florida
State.
Yeah, and I was out in Minnesota, and there was a legendary fullback from those 70s, 60s, all those Bud Grant teams, Bill Brown, who's sort of like Rich Gannon married his daughter. Like, he was entrenched in the community. Everybody knew Bill Brown. I asked Amp Lee about Bill Brown. He thought he had no idea. And then that's where I realized, that's the first time I realized that these guys play football because generally 90% of them because they're good at football.
Yeah.
They don't care about the history. They don't know the history of even their teams that they're on. People like Saquon Barkley are rare.
That's
Very
why
rare.
a lot of times where you get the rarities of guys who played the game, who also love the game, understand the game, appreciate the history of the game. Those are the ones that are good at doing this particular job. But a lot of times
Yeah,
you'll say,
yeah.
like Howie always got disrespected by many because he wasn't a football guy. And I'm always been in the camp like I don't need a football guy running my team because a lot of times they just happen to be really athletic or good at the game. They don't understand what the hell they're doing a lot of times. They just are programmed to do what they're programmed to do, not because they can think the game, cap, this, fit, all that stuff. Like you got to be able to separate yourself from clicks and the boys and all that stuff. And that's why I think having a guy who's not a quote unquote football guy generally is the way to kind of go. It does help to have people that understand a little bit aspects of football, no question. But there's been always that battle with Howie. Was one of the big things was he wasn't a football guy. I had a guy who used to call my show. Oh man, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, you would think, okay, you got to give Roseman a little bit of credit. Nope, it was Joe Douglas. He built the team. Roseman had nothing to do with that team. I said, oh my God. The guy wins a Super Bowl. You can't even give the guy any credit. Nope, it was Joe Douglas. He's the football guy. Roseman doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Yep. Alec Hallaby gets that now.
Yeah.
Because for
you know what,
years,
guys, you know what else I think factors into this too? Like how much football has changed and grown in terms of the sheer size of the companies. Like the Eagles are a $10 billion organization. There's not a billion, let alone 10 billion, $1 billion entity in America where somebody runs every part of the show, like the Belichicks or what Jimmy Johnson used to be. Like, I feel like it's so much bigger now. Everybody's got their own role. And that's kind of why I like the role with Nick now and the way Howie has it set up, because I feel like these companies, they're too big now, man. You're not going to have a coach come in and does the play calling, does the personnel, does the contracts, the draft, everything. It's just not going to be like
what we're talking about in the NBA right now. We're watching the league kind of change right before our very eyes, right? You're watching how the league is kind of going away from the 3 stars and putting more investment into drafting your team instead of signing players. And it's similar in the NFL where I think teams are trying to get away from what you're saying, Zander, is having this guy who's in charge of everything because there's just too much to do in the world, in the game that you live in now. So I think Sirianni as a CEO coach, kind of like, the guy who keeps the locker room together, has a good staff. Like that's kind of like the model that teams are going to start.
And for all the people that criticize it, Mike, I think it's going to be in 10 years. There's going to be a lot of Nick Siriannis. Well, will they do it as good as him? I'm not saying they will, but I think there's going to be a lot more coaches like that.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah. I think the evolution of the games, it changes like every, we saw, the league was, remember the Wildcat era. That's going to be the new way. That kind of faded out a little bit. And you're seeing teams go back to the running back a little bit more now. The Eagles have kind of made that a cool position again. So, yeah, the league kind of turning on its head right before our very eyes, and the Eagles at the forefront of it. By the way, I was in Wawa in Summers Point. If that guy's watching, he said to me, "Hey, are you Mike Gill?" I said, "Yeah." And I figured, hey, I listen to you all the time. He says, "I watch you on Birds 365 every Wednesday." I said,
"Hell yeah,
nice."
You don't listen to me on the radio?
I'm in Summers Point sometimes. I wonder if I'll run into this guy one day. Maybe.
Nice guy. I wish I was kind of in a rush, so I didn't have a chance to ask him his name, but I do remember that guy. If you're watching today, thank you for saying hello. I do have a lot of people that are, but I'm tucked down the shore a lot. A lot of the viewers are probably more up in that area. But if you're down the shore, that guy was a viewer.
It's that time of year.
Yeah,
I've a lot of people. I've had Uber drivers in Phoenix. I've had people at hotels, who watch Birds 365. It's all over the place, Mike. All over.
Yeah. Well, I said, well, do you not listen to me on the radio? What are you talking about?
Come on, man. The listener we promoted every week here on the show. Come on, brother.
Yeah. Well, it's I tell you, the summertime, the Phillies right now, what's going on with them? I mean, they lose 9 out of 10. Then they start winning again. And then last night, it just halts everything, and you're right back to, see, they stink. So it's going to be a fun summer.
Yeah. By the way, what's it like in the middle of summer at the Summers Point Wawa? Because I know the Summers Point Wawa. That's miserable.
Yeah, mayhem. There's like I think it's Wawa. I think there's 3 Wawas at Summers Point now.
Yeah.
There used to be 4. One turned into a Sherwood-Williams. So there's 3 Wawas in Summers Point, and all of them are just nonstop crazy. The one that I was in was on the border.
Ocean City. I mean, at least you're outside of Ocean City.
Yeah, the one I was at was on the border of Linwood and Summers Point on Ocean Heights Avenue there. That one's just constant. It's just crazy because there's a CVS across the street. So it's like, it's like Frogger trying to get in and out of that place.
At Mike Gill's show, be careful. And those are one of the most, there's a lot of bad stuff going in the world, but one of the most dangerous places is a Wawa parking lot. And people just go.
Didn't Barstool Sports rank the worst Wawa parking lots in New Jersey?
Man.
There used to be the Ventnor Heights, in Ventnor Heights, there was a Wawa on the corner of Dorset and whatever that street is there. It had 6 parking spots, 6. Yeah. And the people coming, because it was so small. Oh my God. It was Tetris trying to get in and out of there.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Yeah. Nightmare. Mike Gill, thanks for joining, brother. We appreciate it, man. Shout out to our listener in Summers Point, right outside of Ocean City. We appreciate that. Mike Gill, you guys follow him over on X. And if you're listening, actually go follow him and actually go subscribe and listen to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN and his work on 97.5 The Fanatic in Philly on the weekends. Follow him at Mike Gill's show. Mike, thank you, brother. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you, man.
See you, man.
Thanks, Mike. Mike Gill joining us here on Birds 365. Great stuff from Mike Gill. I love hearing those stories, Johnny Mack, about